All right, let's jump right into this explainer. Today, we're talking about the ultimate underdog story of early human history. We're going to look at exactly how our ancestors managed to survive in a world where they were, quite literally, permanently on the menu.
Picture this. It's 2.5 million years ago. You wake up in the dead of night, completely exposed. No walls, no doors, no shoes. And just 40 meters away, something with 6-inch claws is trying to decide if you look like a good midnight snack. Our ancestors were, biologically speaking, prey animals. We had no claws, no natural armor. We were essentially walking straight into waterhole traps every single day.
The contrast here is just wild. On one side, you have us. Small brains, no fire, soft, naked, incredibly fragile. And on the other side, real life, highly evolved, killing machines. We're talking prehistoric hyenas the size of bears that crunched elephant bones for fun. Massive crocodiles, even the Haast's eagle, a bird that literally hunted human-sized prey from the sky. No way, right?
To put this physical danger into perspective, think about the number 28. The infamous saber-toothed cat Smilodon had canine teeth up to 28 centimeters long. That's nearly a foot of razor-sharp bone, evolved for one specific reason: to pierce and tear.
And if a foot-long tooth doesn't freak you out, how about 1,000? Our ancestors shared their backyard with cave bears that stood 12 feet tall on their hind legs and weighed a staggering 1,000 kilograms. That is a ton of angry bear. We were just incredibly small and incredibly slow in a world run by heavily armored giants.
So moving into Section 1, Groups, Trees, and Fire. These were our first real defenses. So, how on earth did we avoid extinction without any natural weapons? Well, it started with something called the dilution effect. Basically, by grouping up into bands of 25 or more, early humans used math to survive. If you're one of 25, the statistical chance of you specifically getting grabbed drops way down. But they didn't just stand around waiting, right? They coordinated. They'd scream, bang rocks together, just make an absolute rocket to completely ruin a predator's risk-reward calculation. Predators can't afford to get injured, so an angry, screaming mob throwing rocks, usually enough to make them think twice and back off.
But then the sun goes down, and sleeping for 8 hours in the wild, that is a massive vulnerability. It forced our ancestors into some seriously terrifying trade-offs. You could climb up high and sleep in trees, which kept you safe from the wolves and hyenas, sure, but left you wide open to incredible climbers like leopards. Or you could find a nice, defensible cave to hide from the weather. The catch? You were essentially signing up for a timeshare with the massive cave bears and lions that already lived there.
Then the discovery of controlled fire completely changed the game. Before fire, the world happened to us. We were just victims of the night. After fire, we happened to the world. And this is absolutely crucial, because almost every large land predator has an instinctual evolutionary fear of fire hardwired right into its brain. Keeping a fire burning exploited that fear. It created a boundary nothing wanted to cross, completely ruining a predator's stealth. Finally, the dark was survivable.
Which brings us to Section 2, the generational survival database, and our major cognitive advancements.
Because beyond the physical defenses, it was actually an invisible cognitive leap that stopped us from being permanent prey. I mean, think about it. How do you learn about a lethal threat without dying first? In a prehistoric world without complex communication, every single person has to personally experience an attack to know an animal is dangerous. And finding out a leopard is dangerous by bumping into one? Yeah, that's usually a terminal lesson. The knowledge literally dies with you.
That is where complex language steps in and completely rewires the dynamic. Language took those individual fatal experiences and transformed them into a continuously compounding database. It allowed us to describe threats, explain what animal tracks looked like, and warn kids who wouldn't even be born for another generation. We built this massive, accumulating knowledge base of survival that predators, who pretty much just relied on their biology, simply could not compete with.
And all this shared knowledge fed right into a concept ecologists call the landscape of fear. Our ancestors used their collective language to pool observations and build a highly detailed, shared mental map of their entire environment. They stopped just reacting to predators jumping out of the bushes and started actively modifying their behavior. They chose settlements based on natural barriers, seasonal threats, and safe sightlines. They were literally outsmarting predators before a physical encounter even happened.
Moving on to Section 3. Spears and endurance machines. This is where we start flipping the script.
This is a huge turning point. We stopped just playing defense and actually became an offensive threat. Around 400,000 years ago, the shoning and spears changed everything. These weren't just pointy sticks, folks. They were aerodynamically engineered weapons that brought the physics of projectile motion right into the wild. By throwing these from 30 or 40 meters away, humans completely bypassed the physical armor, size, and strength of those massive carnivores. And predators are smart, right? Getting wounded from a distance taught them over generations to actively avoid us. The fear slowly started shifting in the other direction.
And alongside our tools, we tapped into a pretty bizarre biological superpower. Look, we are clearly not sprinters. A lion beats us off the line every single time. But humans? We are endurance machines. Because we sweat across our entire body surface, we can cool down while we keep moving. Predators, on the other hand, have to physically stop and pant to cool off. This let humans do persistence hunting. We could literally just run down overheated prey, or outlast threats over immense distances in the blistering heat. We could just keep going, long after everything else had to stop.
And that leads us to Section 4, becoming the apex predator, the ultimate shift.
When you stack up those brains, tools, and biology, you hit the behavioral modernity threshold about 50,000 years ago. We weren't just scraping by anymore. We were thriving. We started using long-range planning. We used cave paintings to communicate complex animal migrations, invented bone needles, rope, intricate traps. We were even organizing to drive entire herds of animals off cliffs. And maybe most surprisingly, we began systematically and deliberately killing apex predators. We started ritualistically processing cave bear pelts and actively clearing out the very animals that used to hunt us. Talk about sending a message.
And that brings us to a deeply sobering correlation: the vanished megafauna. The woolly mammoth, the saber-toothed cat, the massive cave bear, the giant hyena with those elephant-crushing jaws. It's no coincidence that shortly after fully modern humans showed up on nearly every continent, the massive animals that had survived multiple ice ages and dominated ecosystems for millions of years just collapsed. They went entirely extinct. We were the common variable that arrived right before these invincible creatures vanished forever.
Ultimately, our ancestors proved something incredible. By stacking fire, language, spears, and this profound social coordination, we could learn and adapt so much faster than biological evolution could even keep up. We became, quietly and unstoppably, the most dangerous thing to ever walk this planet. Not because we were the biggest, not because we were the fastest, but because we were the most dangerous. So I'll leave you with this. The monsters that once hunted us in the dark didn't stand a chance. They just learned to be afraid a little too late. So what does that incredible, deeply ingrained capacity for rapid, shared adaptation mean for the seemingly insurmountable challenges we face today?